Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in this world or whenever you may be watching this video. My name is Jacob, and welcome back to Canadian STI. Alright, so I'm going to first off start by saying that this portion of the video was shot after the fact, after me attempting to install my speaker into my car. However, I got it in. It was a bit of a shit show, but it all worked out in the end. It works great. The only other thing I need to do is kind of soundproof a few things, but I'll get into that after. But so, you want to replace your speaker, your rear sub for your Harman Kardon system, because if I'm not mistaken, other trims of the STI don't have the rear sub like the one I have outside does. But so my STI has the Harman Kardon system. As I explained in one of my very first videos, I had the sub in the back, and whoever had owned the car, because I got it used, whoever had owned the car before me, it absolutely just clapped out the speaker. So it wasn't good. It sounded like blowing raspberries. Like, you know what I mean? When a good, nice, bassy part came on, it was just like, and so I mean, it wasn't an ideal situation. So my first thought whenever I first got the car, I dealt with it for a long time, and this was like bass on completely zero, so I couldn't, there's nothing else I could really do as far as turning it down, and it still just was clapped. So my first thought was to replace it, obviously. And so I was at Subaru for other issues before, and I had inquired about it very briefly, and they told me that it was gonna cost me, for a Harman Kardon rear sub, it was gonna cost me like $540 or something like that. And so that just wasn't ideal to me. So, but the guy himself at Subaru, who worked in parts and service, actually recommended a kicker speaker. And I know why now that I have it installed already. But so, for those of you who want to grab the same one, this is the guy right here. It's the Kicker 400 watt dual coil voice speaker, because your speaker doesn't only have one connection on it, it actually has two, one on either side. And now there's also configurations to wire them up, such as like wiring them in parallel or in series, but that's a whole kind of different story. I had honestly just wired it up in the same configuration that the original speaker was wired up, and it works great for me, so I'm confident that it's using the full amount of power, because there's 2 ohm, 4 ohm, 8 ohm configurations and all that stuff like that. So don't worry so much about that when you're installing it. That's more for if you're doing a standalone, or like installing it into a box in your trunk or something along those lines. But so yeah, just wanted to say this video is essentially, it's a failed install. Okay, so I started going so much, I had a plan, I was going to do it that way. It didn't end up working out. So but I'll show you guys how much I got, and I honestly want to deeply apologize in advance, because my videography wasn't the best going throughout this, so my camera was quite shaky. It just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. So actually, since I'm going to look into getting like some sort of phone stand or something that I can use to better show you guys things, because just how I did it wasn't ideal, trying to hold the camera in one hand, trying to get some other things done. So I'll show you guys here on out like the progress that I had made up to the point where I had stopped and went a completely different way. And then in between though, I'll explain kind of what I did, what problems I ran into. And if you plan to get this speaker, which it's a very, very good speaker. Like, now that I have it in and it's in properly, well, as proper as it can be, it works great. Like, it's phenomenal for what I need for it. And like, I'm not a big bass head, so I don't need anything crazy. I don't need it on my own standalone sub or anything like that. But this one, well, let me tell you, it does the job, and it does it well. So I'll have this link down below for anyone who wants to get it. But just note that you're gonna have to have an installation plan, because it's not as easy as just dropping it in and calling it a day. But I'll run you guys through what I kind of did for my original plan, and then I'll come in at an intermission to tell you what I ended up doing, and I explain it also in another clip. But regardless, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright guys, so here's the speaker right here that I said I was going to install. Now, it's very much worth noting that with the holes on the speaker right here, they were a little small, and I was lucky enough to find self-tapping screws that the heads perfectly had fit in the original hole. So these little guys right here, and because that's the plan, that's the way I plan to go with this. So you could drill holes and put like hardware on the bottom, like a nut and bolt kind of deal, but or even just screws. I probably should have tried to find some with a head, because what I ended up having to do was actually drill, like bore out. It's not the cleanest look either, unfortunately, but I had to bore out each hole to make sure that my socket fits in it. Because also I don't have a drill bit that will hold a socket to be able to drill these self-tapping screws in, so I'm gonna have to start the hole by kind of boring it out. I'm gonna have to start the hole with a drill bit and then finish it with the self-tapping screw. So I made sure to bore holes big enough where I can fit this inside of it and it'll go in nice, because these were just perfect. And if I were to put my socket over it, then what would happen is it wouldn't be big enough to actually go in. So that's what I ended up doing. So I had to drill these out, and I believe these are about like, oh, they're 1/4 inch long. So I can't advise on how big these heads actually are. Or actually, you know what? One second, I'll see if I can get something to find out. All right, so perfectly, actually, I had a set of calipers. The heads on these are 8.5 millimeters, or for those who want it in inches, 0.3350 inches. So, or just around that, because I know it kind of got a little unsettled in there. But so that is the size of the heads. Like I said, unfortunately, I needed to drill and bore out those holes. So that's what I ended up doing with this. And now it's also worth noting, I'll see if I can take this out with one hand, but it's a heavy boy, so let me put you guys down real quick. Sorry. There we go. All right, so it's also worth noting that these speakers actually have kind of some weather, like it's a little bit of foam insulation here. You can see the black going around. It's kind of like a foam. So that'll help with like sound deadening, but I ended up actually getting some foam strips that I could use to try to kind of reinforce it a little bit more to make sure that it wasn't going to like rattle inside or anything like that. So I got some of that too, and I'll be kind of installing that into the speaker. And so what I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll be right back. I'll show you guys what I mean. All right, so this is what I ended up having. It's not the best stuff. I think it's like weather stripping, like for foam. And honestly, I was gonna go on Amazon and order like some actual like sound deadening pads or something like that, but I ended up just going with this because it was cheap and it was easy to get. So I put it all around, make sure to kind of dodge the holes. And the only reason I put this stuff on, it didn't just go with like the what's on it, is because I'm gonna be torquing these down, like torquing these screws down. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna have any issues in regards to getting it on there. So that's what I ended up doing. So what I'm gonna end up doing is going out, taking out the rear dash lid, rear deck lid, rear dash lid, whatever you wanna call it. What I'll do is take a Sharpie, make sure it's big enough, and then put it to where exactly I want it, mark the holes, mark each hole, and then I'll remove the speaker. And then what I'll do after that is wherever the holes are marked, I'll kind of drill a very small hole to kind of start the tap, or at least like just kind of start it so it's easier on me, because like I said, I don't have a drill bit for these little 1/2 inch self-tapping screws. So once I drill a hole, I'll then be able to, it'll be a lot easier to do with like the ratchet, the way I'm going to go with it. Now, honestly, this isn't the super conventional way to do it, honestly. But I'm just working with what I got without having to go out and spend a bunch of money on just tiny little items to make this work a little better. I know I should, and it's not going to be like the cleanest install, but it'll be an install and it'll work. So that's all I'm looking forward to, really. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get outside, and I'm going to try to, I don't have a phone stand or anything like that. So I'm going to attempt to kind of go through with you guys and rip apart the rear end of the car and take all the dash lid off to access the speaker. But we'll get out there, we'll do that, and we'll see how it goes anyway. Alright, so we're out here at the STI. As you can see, I kind of sprayed it off today, but it's pretty nasty outside, so it's still got a little dirty. But sorry in advance for the shakiness. I want to apologize. But so what depending on if it's a nice enough day and if you're in a garage even, you want to keep your doors open, you're perfectly fine with doing that. However, I'm gonna kind of get cozied up in here and close all the doors, because where it is like +2, but still a little cold. So I want to make sure we can get everything done. But first off, you're gonna want to start by putting your seats down. Don't mind all my detailing towels back there. But make sure your seats are pushed forward, or else these seats are not going to clear. Like I had to do that with the passenger seat. So make sure that's done. I'm going to move this guy forward. All right. And so pretty much we're going to start off. There's really only 3 pieces that you need to worry about. And that's this trim piece over here, this trim piece over here, and of course your whole rear dash lid. Which, damn, I need to clean that because that's a little dirty. It's been a while since I've been back here. So there's that. Now whenever doing this, you can get a trim tool, and you have to be really careful taking these off because your airbags are actually behind these on both sides. So just be really careful when doing that, because obviously you don't want your airbags to deploy while you're just chilling. So anyway, I'm gonna get these off right here. I might try to like show it, but I can't guarantee it'll be very good, but I'll try. Anyway, yeah, let's get started. All right, so I'm all cozied up in here, and now, like I said, you can try. You can get a trim remover tool. I'm gonna try to use this and maybe just use my fingers. That's how I did it last time whenever I tried to take this off. So you can use that door panel removal tool, or just whatever you want. But like I said, be very careful with these pieces because they will. There are airbags behind them. So here, I'm gonna switch hands here. I just want to apologize, guys, in advance, because this is not like the best situation, but don't pry from up on your windshield. You obviously don't want to break your rear windshield, but there's one clip. So we can start it with that and then just grab with our fingers, pull, and then rotate it off onto your seat belt, and there we go. Now, here's what the back of it looks like. Now notice how I'm missing a clip in the middle. It's actually right there. It's that white guy right there. And pretty sure and that's your airbag. So like I said, be careful. Do be very careful. So what I'm gonna do is take this guy, slide it right in here if I can, and we're gonna try to pry that little clip out. There we go. Make sure you retain these guys, because obviously you don't want them going anywhere. And so what I'm gonna do is actually just clip it right back in here. There we go. And that piece is off. So I'm gonna do the other side very quickly, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I was easily able to get that piece off. And now it's time for the rear dash lid. Now there's a few clips in a few places. So I think you have some here, you have one back here. I can't remember if there's one right here or not. I'll be able to show it after I take it off, but back here and back here. And then you have some lip, like a lip. Your tabs go over this lip right here. So you just pull up, and pull up. And then we can kind of go back over here and pry very graciously. Don't just rip this up, because you don't want to cut your hand, like end up cutting your hand on your airbag. And obviously you don't want to rip this off, like right off. But so there's a clip like right around here somewhere. We're just gonna pull up as graciously as we can. There we go. There's that clip. And then we'll do this side. There we go. There's that clip. And then what I'm gonna do is come back over to this side. Make sure that's unclipped from there, because that kind of grooves in on the corner. So we can unclip that guy. We're just gonna push up where we can. I'm gonna do this with 2 hands, just so it's a little easier on me, but I'll be, oh, I should actually note, here's your back light right here. You're gonna have to haul this guy up. It's very easily removable. So there, you move that guy. And then underneath, sorry for my messy trunk, guys. Underneath, you have a connector right here. I actually already disconnected it. I know it's hard to see, I apologize. You have a connector right here and right here that should be connected together. Unconnect those and just haul this guy right out nice and gracefully. And there's your rear, one of your rear tail lights. So anyway, I'll be right back and I'll get the rest of this ripped off. All right, so I used both hands, got this completely free. And I'm gonna pull this down. Do not remove the seatbelt. It's a pain. So I would just avoid doing that. But I'm gonna try to flip this around for you guys a little bit. Show you. So you have a clip there, clip there, clip here. Ooh, where is it? Where is it? Right there, sorry. And then right down there. And then there's one guy in the middle right there as well. Thankfully those all stayed in, so I don't have to mess around with them, but that's what you got. We're gonna flip this back around. Kind of set it down a little bit. Keep it a little bit out of the way, and here's what we're looking at. So your Harman Kardon's rear subwoofer right here is held in. This is the housing that it gets held on, and you have to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 10mm bolts. And so once we remove those, I'll show you guys kind of unclipping it, and then we'll go from there. And yeah, I'll show you guys what's up. All right, so I got all of those 10mm bolts out, the 5 that were there, and now this guy should come up free. Now, when lifting it up, you are going to be a little restricted because of the connectors here. That little white guy actually connects up into the speaker. I already removed it before, so I'm not worried about that, but removing that and kind of prying it out, maybe with a flathead screwdriver, will give you a little bit more room to work with, because it is in there. There we go. See, it was kind of stuck in there, but now it's out. It gives me a little bit more room to work with. So right here, these are your 2 connectors. There's one on each side. So what we're gonna do is unclip them, and no, this kind of is a little deceiving and looks like it might unclip and that this is actually part of the speaker, but no, this whole black part comes off, and there's 2 terminals on this white piece that connect to this black connector. So I'm gonna rip these off real quick, and then I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, so I freed up this speaker. Here's what I'm talking about. There's your 2 terminals. Might be a little hard to take out at first, but they will come out, do mind you. Wow, I'm gonna have to clean this before I put it back on because this is dusty. Here's your black connectors that connected in. So this part right here, actually it's kind of convenient because these can actually come out. Like, you can kind of pry these apart here, and it'll show the 2 little wires that actually connect into it. Anyway, we're gonna peel these out, and we'll go from there. I'll show you guys what I mean. All right, guys. So I was fortunate enough that little white connector actually had the 2 pieces that came off here. So what I ended up doing was taking them off, cutting the connectors that actually connect onto the speaker here, and then stripping the wires. So what I'm gonna do is hook them up into the kicker speaker, and we'll kind of go from there. And hopefully this all works out. So we're going to verify that it works before we just go ahead and start screwing stuff in, because obviously we don't want to screw it in if it's not going to work. We want to make sure we can troubleshoot, so on and so forth. So I'm going to do that real quick, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Alright, so the way the kicker speakers work, thankfully, is they're very conveniently have like quick release connections. So all you have to do is push these down, stick your wire in, and then release, and they'll be connected just like this one. So I'm gonna get this all connected up, and then I'll show you guys and verify that it works. And if it works, then we'll go ahead and start screwing it down, and we'll see how that all goes. Alright, so I got it in. I verified that it worked. Everything's fine and everything, but whenever I was trying to push it down, it would stop working. So I kind of rearranged it in a way that when I pushed it down, it wouldn't stop. And so here's what we ended up with. I marked the holes with a Sharpie. They are awful close to the side, but I'm gonna send it and just see how it turns out anyway. And I'll be back and let you guys know how that ends up going. So we got that installed, not quite actually, but I don't know if you can see, I started the holes on each one. It was kind of hard to get a drill like closer as the back windshield comes down, but I got those holes started. So what I'm gonna try to do is try to get in there and torque down some self-tapping screws. Everything's connected, everything works, so I'll be right back, and hopefully this works out. Fingers crossed. Alright, so I had my fingers crossed, but clearly they weren't crossed tight enough because I had to completely scrap that plane. So what I did stupidly was, where I started the holes, it wasn't ideal to where they were gonna fit. Like, measure once, cut once. I know that saying doesn't necessarily apply here fully, but I didn't measure right. I put holes in the chassis and they didn't align, and so things just didn't work out the way I wanted them to. So to briefly explain what I ended up doing, you'll see in one of the previous clips too, and I may or may not splice into like a little picture of one of my previous clips to try to show you what I'm talking about. But so your Harman Kardon speaker isn't just the speaker, it has a housing around it that you saw. It's the silver metal part that goes around the speaker. What I ended up having to do was scrap the idea of putting it into the blue part like I wanted. I needed to, first I separated the speaker from the housing, so it was just the housing by itself. And now it kind of bowled down and there was 2 screws on each side, like there was like 2 pieces that came in a bowl. I cut those off with a hacksaw because the bottom part of the kicker speaker was too big, so it wouldn't fit down properly. So I cut those out, so I was just left with the housing and little sound deadening pads that they put on them from factory. What I ended up doing was actually measuring correctly. I set the speaker on in the place that it needed to be. It needed to be sideways because of the way that it worked with the connections. Like, it's almost like an oval when you look down in under where your speaker is, and those 2 parts of those connections on the kicker speaker are actually bare, so if they touch the chassis, they're gonna ground out, and it's gonna cause the speaker not to work. Hence why you see in one of those previous clips, I was like, oh, when I push down, it stopped working because it was grounding out. So I ended up just wrapping some electrical tape around those to make sure that they didn't ground out, obviously. And I don't think they're touching anything now anyway with the way I have it in. But regardless, that piece that bowled down, I cut that off. I put the speaker up into it, or slid it up like a pair of pants up around the speaker. I marked in the correct spots where I needed to mount it to. What I ended up doing was drilling the correct holes and still using the self-tapping screws. So I still self-tap screws into that housing, and then they stuck out on the bottom. So on the bottom of the speaker, they still stuck out a little bit to the point where they'd be touching that part and they'd be rattling, or it wouldn't secure properly. So what I ended up doing was actually a mixture of cutting and filing those down as best as I could without ruining like the sound deadening pads that were around it. I took the weather strip out from under the kicker speaker itself, and so it was just speaker to housing, nothing in between. So I did that. I cut and filed all of the little nubs from all the self-tapping screws after I knew like where it was permanently gonna set. And so afterwards, the issue with that is that the housing are going around the speaker, the ring going around the speaker stopped the 10mm bolts that we took out in the very first of the clip. It stopped me from putting those in. The washers do not come off of those bolts, unfortunately. So what I needed to do actually was kind of make, like, I had to cut grooves in the speaker. Now I'm not super proud of how I had to do that because but at that point I'd already reamed or bored out the holes for the self-tapping screw, so there was no way I was gonna like be able to return that speaker anyway. Like it was gonna be a permanent thing. So after I got it in the housing, I took it back off. I cut out grooves in the speaker from where I needed to secure the 10mm bolts with the washers into the housing to make sure that everything's secured down nicely. I didn't do all of them because some of them are too, like the holes, if that makes sense, were too close into the speaker, and I'll explain it in the next clip, I think, because I had shot that a few days ago, but they were too close to the speaker to the point where I'd ruin the speaker if I went any further with the grooves. So I cut out, thankfully, there was 1, 2, and 3. So there was one bolt that didn't touch the speaker at all because the housing kind of goes around and then it ovals or like a tear drops out, and that part has its own bolt, which is great. I hope I'm explaining this right because I can only imagine from your guys' point of view. But anyway, so I made sure there was 3 points of contact with bolts, so it was all secured down nicely. After I did that, I mounted the speaker into the housing once again so it looked nice. The washers fit in, and what I ended up doing was so I put it in, and I put weather stripping, like the weather strip that I had, between the housing and the car, because at that point I still wanted to make sure that those nubs from me filing down the self-tapping screws weren't gonna interfere with like the actual chassis or the part in your rear dash lid that that your speaker housing actually mounts to, because I obviously don't want rattling happening. And so that's what I did. I filed those down, put more weather stripping, I secured them down nicely, and the speaker works. It works great, works phenomenal. It's in there and not going anywhere. But enough of me talking. I'll show you that little clip of kind of afterwards what I ended up doing. And again, I apologize that I didn't get that footage, because that's kind of crucial if you're going to be using one of these speakers, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out if you decide to go this route. Note that if you just get a replacement Harman Kardon rear sub, then you can just drop it in, unplug it, plug the new one in, drop it in, it'll be great. But with this one, it took a little finadoodling to get it in there. So without further ado, I'll show you that clip and you guys can check it out.
All right, so to reiterate what I was talking about, I ended up taking the housing off of the stock speaker. So there's the stock one right there. It had this metal housing, and it had kind of like two little pieces that were almost like a little bowl that I had to take off to make sure the bottom of the speaker, like that big guy, fit through. And so I took that off. I put self-tapping screws into the housing, and no, not all the bolts are in, but all the good supporting ones are, because as you can see, I'm not very proud of how it ended up going in, because I did have to kind of mangle the speaker, not mangle it, but kind of do a little bit of working to it to make sure that those washers and everything sat flush, and these ones were too close into the speaker where it would ruin it if I were to try to get those ones. So what I ended up doing is self-tap screws into the housing after cutting off those two pieces that bowled down, if that makes sense. Put the self-tapping screws in. I then filed the screws down on the bottom side, so obviously they weren't like going into the metal here, or the sheet, whatever you want to call it. And so I did that. Obviously, like I said, I kind of made some little grooves in the speakers and put to be able to like secure the washers in. I took the weather stripping out from underneath like this part of the speaker to the housing, because that has its own kind of little sound deadening thing, which was perfect. And also this housing also has sound deadening thing, but after cutting the self-tapping screws from the bottom and filing them down a little bit, I then put more weather stripping under it to make sure that it actually like does its job and doesn't rattle around. And actually it worked out pretty well. Speaker still works great, it sounds phenomenal still. And so that's what I ended up doing. There's one, there's two, there's the third holding it down. And so it's not going anywhere. It doesn't rattle, thankfully. But so that's what I ended up doing, and I have to apologize again, because this was not like the ideal way to shoot this video either. Given I wanted to make a nice install video, but this speaker was hard. This speaker was hard to put in. I will say, like, a little difficult. I've done speakers before and I've done pretty well with them, but this one I kind of had to mangle a little bit. And as long as it doesn't blow, like, this is mostly permanent. But we'll go back in and I'll talk about it a little bit more into detail and what you guys can do and what to avoid and so on and so forth. But I think I'm gonna put this back on off camera, just because it'll be easier on me. But again, so we have a clip that goes into one of these holes. I believe it's this guy. A clip that goes over there, clip that goes in right there, and a clip on that side, as well as a clip that goes into this middle hole right here. So just remember that when putting your thing in, when putting your rear dash lid. And yeah, be careful popping your other trim pieces back onto the side, because those are the airbags. Again, I'm not trying to like slack off here, but it'd just be easier for me to do this because I don't even have a phone stand or a camera stand or anything like that, so I can't like set this up and do it. So what I'm going to do off camera is just clean this up and reinstall it, and hopefully that isn't sitting too high to the point where that doesn't sit on nicely. So I'll do that. I'm gonna go inside and we'll talk about this a little bit more, guys.
So moral of the story is, if you want to install this speaker, be careful. Maybe find a different plan of action. Use sealant. Just seal it onto your thing. Maybe not actually, but that was pretty much it. So I apologize once again for like the shoddiness of the way this video turned out, but it's here for anyone who wants information or wants to look in or see what's going on. So I have it out here. But I appreciate you guys for watching. Thanks to the 22 subscribers I have now for subscribing. I appreciate you guys, and that's pretty much it. So if you guys like this video, like the channel, like and subscribe or whatever. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But anyway, I hope you guys have a good morning, a good evening, a good afternoon, wherever you are in this world or whenever you may be watching this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.